Coming up on Chasing the Natty, the transfer portal is heating up as the season comes to an end, but we also got conference championships, tons and tons of stakes, both in the CFB world and the CFF world, coming to a head right after this.
Look downfield and Circus, one-handed catch is made.
Jones goes to the end zone. Oh, what a catch! Devontae Smith, touchdown Alabama.
Watch out for Mr. Robinson. This kid is going to be special and is already flashing.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college football fantasy podcast.
All right, welcome in everybody. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. I hope you guys are all doing really well. Like I said with last week, CFF Championship's done and over with. Congratulations to winners everywhere. We're now officially kind of turning the page from the CFF 2021 season. We're in that weird in-between area where the fantasy season is over, but the actual season isn't quite over. We got conference championships. We got bowl games coming up. We'll get to those as soon as all those details get figured out. But before that, we got conference championships this weekend. And really even the bigger story today is just as soon as the regular season's over, the transfer portal is now heating up massively. And we got a ton of guys. We got a couple of guys that we really want to touch on. Some other guys I'll throw out there real quick near the end of that segment. If we want to talk about any of those guys further. But before we go any further, I want to welcome our guest for tonight, Mr. CK. CK is a wonderful guy I've been talking to quite a bit on Twitter. He was part of the Kings Classic draft for us this year. I believe he was on a team with Scott Bogman, if y'all listen to their show. CK is a fantastic dude. But yeah, CK, welcome onto the show and let everybody know what you're working on and where they can find you at.
Yeah, so it's great to be on. Thank you for inviting me. I'm a big fan of the show. I've listened for a while for both you and Xavier. It's an honor to be invited onto the show here and give my knowledge. I actually do a baseball podcast, the Heater podcast, but I'm thinking about doing a college fantasy football podcast here in the off season. So we'll see. I'll keep you updated and follow me on Twitter. I'll let you know for sure if I do that. Otherwise, my Twitter page is a lot of baseball and a lot of CFF, and I just love the game.
Absolutely. Again, CK is an awesome guy. Asked if he could come on today because he was asking about if anybody wanted to discuss conference championships. I'm like, hey, guess what we're talking about this week?
That's right.
So that's what we'll be doing today. But yeah, let's just go ahead and get on into it. We're going to first, I got a few questions I want to ask CK about the season and stuff like that. Just a few things I've been asking a lot of some of the other guests that have been coming on recently. But CK, what are some of the things you've noticed about the CFF landscape in 2021 or just the college football landscape in general? This can be regarding just the amount of people playing, anything to do with the actual season, strategies may be changing. What do you think?
So the number of people playing is growing so fast. So I've only been doing CFF myself. This will be my third year coming up here in the next fall. So I've done it 2 years. And 2 years ago, it was hard to even get into a league with people who are competitive and, understood the game, it felt like. And now, because I see you going on Twitter and going to Georgia games and spreading the word and people spreading the word and John Lobb and all these guys out there, and CFF's blowing up and I love it. Like, I'm hoping that before long it gets bigger than fantasy football, because CFF is, I know people get intimidated by the player pool, but once you get used to it, it's so much better.
It really is. And like I've mentioned this before, NFL is huge. I get it. I don't see a world currently where CFF surpasses NFL fantasy anytime soon because, again, it's just massive. It's just the predominant fantasy platform for every sport. But that doesn't mean the CFF can't be close. College football is bigger than NFL in so many different parts of the country, specifically the Southeast. There's no reason why we can't take advantage of that and grow it down there, whether that be through maybe conference specific leagues, maybe that be through like if people are intimidated by the player pool, maybe Power 5 leagues only, Group of 5 leagues only, conference specific leagues, stuff like that. I think our people would be more willing to test out, but even still, once they get their feet wet in that, then they'll give themselves a bigger challenge by trying out these full FBS leagues, which are always incredible.
Yeah, and you do great work with the conference-specific leagues. I know you did those best balls in the offseason. I got in a few of them. I don't think I did particularly well in any of them, but I was in them.
If you didn't, don't feel bad. The one that I joined, the SEC one, I got last place in my own league. So it was a rough one. I remember that draft specifically because I got the last pick in that draft, and I figured out very quickly. I think I might, if I can, turn those into auction leagues next year of some kind, because to me, because the player pools dry up so quickly in those leagues, it is a massive disadvantage to be at the 10th pick versus the first pick in those kind of leagues. Like CFF, because the player pool is so big, you can, kind of work your way. But even still, I felt immediately at a disadvantage when I did that. So I'm like, honestly, I might play around with it, just make it a little bit more involved next year. But even still, some other things you notice about this year that you want to talk about?
I just want to point out, I was looking through some of the teams that won a championship in the leagues I was in, and just the advantage that having a solid tight end. Now, you mentioned the player pool is so big, so you can stream tight ends in CFF, but I know I was running through a team where I was bouncing through like Marshawn Ford and Lucas Krull, and they were okay, but the teams that win ended up having a lot of Michael Mayer. They had a lot of Trey McBride, I saw in a lot of teams. If Cole Turner would have been healthy, I'm sure that would have been a big part of it too. Yes, you can stream the tight end, but there is something to be said for having a tight end that you can just lock and load into your lineup and say, every week, this guy is going to produce for me too.
I mean, absolutely. We saw that 2 years ago with Kyle Pitts once he took over at Florida. I don't know a championship team that basically didn't have Kyle Pitts there because he was just a cheat code for
the positional advantage.
Such a massive positional advantage for anybody playing every single week, because you can have a good tight end that might get you like at a ceiling of 20 points, but Kyle Pitts it was possible for him to hit 25, 30 points any given week.
Yeah. So like next year, I know I was already starting to look at some of the player pool already. I will be targeting Brock Bowers on your team, Georgia. I'll be looking at Michael Merrigan.
Yes, sir.
I want someone who I think can consistently get me into the 20-point range instead of maybe gets me to 20 points.
I'm not gonna lie, Brock Bowers has been one of the bigger surprises, even among us Georgia fans, because like everybody was pointing at Darnell Washington. We knew that if Georgia had the right tight end, like Darnell Washington, that they could explode in this offense. But really, Brock Bowers came on strong this year, so I'm with you here. I think he's going to be one of the top tight ends taken. Have you seen? Like, I looked at the Senior Bowl and just the amount of like CFF quality tight ends going to the Senior Bowl this year. This is going to be like basically a big reset year next year at the tight end position, because like some of these guys like Cole Turner, Trey McBride, Isaiah Likely,
Ferguson, I saw. Yeah.
Jake Ferguson, like all these guys that we've been relying on the past couple of years, they're all gone. They're all gone. So we got to really dive deep into the tight end position next year. So the other question I wanted to ask you, and I'll answer this myself because I haven't answered this before, but what is one player that you were kind of hyping up in the offseason that you felt like you hit, and one player that you felt like you whiffed on?
Big hit for me was I looked at the shortened 2020 season, and I looked specifically down at, I know UTEP, it's hard to believe. I looked at a little bit of UTEP, but I was really impressed with Jacob Cowing. I saw him, I think they played North Texas at the end of 2020, and he was just like popping off, and I looked up the stats, and I loved the yards per catch, and I thought, well, I know it's UTEP. I don't know that they're going to move the ball all that much, and I was pleasantly surprised. So I think I took Jacob Cowing in every one of my teams in the second to last or the last round, and after a while, it was plug and play. Like I never took him out of my lineup. It was every time he's on the field, I felt confident that he was getting me 100 yards or a touchdown, and that's all you want, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And again, like teams like that, especially if you're in a PPR league, like even if they're not good for scoring touchdowns, like even on bad teams and they're behind a lot, they're going to be throwing the ball to their guys. So you can expect them to probably get like 7 to 10 receptions every single game, and that's a great floor for you to have with guys like that. What's one or two players that you felt like you whiffed on?
I took way too much Jalen Robinson. I thought that Gus Malzahn couldn't mess up UCF. And yeah, I could blame some of it on the injuries. But even when he was healthy, he did not look like the Jalen Robinson that I paid a third, fourth round pick for way too many times. And the big the big miss I had at running back was I looked at SMU's offense and I thought this team's going to be scoring constantly. And I saw Ulysses Bentley was great last year. So I paid up a lot for Ulysses Bentley. And once again, I could blame it on the injuries, but even when he was healthy, they just did not give him the ball. It was Tanner Mordecai and I can't blame him for using Tanner Mordecai, but
Exactly.
those two really came back to hurt me.
Yeah, I'd say one player that I hit on, and I've been hyping him up all year long, but Charleston Rambo at Miami, so many people kind of wrote him off after he didn't explode at Oklahoma like they thought he was going to. And I saw him go to Miami, and I'm like, I like this fit. I like this fit a lot. And he didn't mesh super well with De'Aaron King like I thought he would. But once Tyler Van Dyke took over, and really either Tyler Van Dyke or Jake Garcia, considering what I heard from practice, either one of those two got the starting gig. Once De'Aaron King was out for the year, he was going to explode, and he did. And he actually finished the season as a top 30 wide receiver, which, if you're listening from an NFL perspective, top 30 wide receiver, like, oh, whoop-de-doo. Top 30 wide receiver is massive in college. There's a lot of receivers in college. So the fact that he was going in like, oh God, I should have my ADP sheet
in the last few rounds, yeah.
Last few rounds, if not undrafted. And I've been hyping him up. I think I drafted him on between my best ball leagues and my whatchamacallit leagues, my redraft leagues and such like that, or season-long formats. I think I drafted him 11 times, which is by far the most amount I'd ever drafted a player in different leagues. Now, one big whiff, I went back through a lot of my lineups to see like who I drafted a lot that really kind of whiffed on me, and two names really came up. One was Caleb Ellaby, quarterback for Western Michigan. I really liked what I saw out of him against the MAC last year. Ending the season there, I was like, okay, if he can repeat that, he's going to be a stud this year. Absolutely not. Just really can never get it going in that offense. I mean, the offense was fine, but it's just like he was never the linchpin of that offense. So he kind of fell apart.
They ended up going through Ladarius Jefferson a lot more and Sean Tyler. Like they ended up running the ball a lot more than I thought. I spent a lot of picks on Sky Moore in that offense, and he was good, but he was a lot more inconsistent than I thought he would be.
Did you play him the championship week?
I did not.
It
came back to cost me.
But even so, and then the other name that I kept seeing was I liked Britton Brown a lot in the UCLA offense. And at the beginning of the year, like when it was a split backfield, it looked like those two were going to be like the next Michael Carter and
Javonte Williams.
Javonte Williams. Thank you very much. Looked like that was going to be the next like big fantasy tandem for this year. I was like, all right, I can deal with Britton Brown being like the 1B in this offense, and this is what he's going to get me every week. And then as the season just went on, Charbonnet clearly became the guy, and Britton Brown just kind of fell off. And I'm like, well, lost that positional battle. But
that happens, right? UCLA, when it comes to Chip Kelly, it's always hard because he loves to rotate those running backs. So you would think that I had a Charbonnet on only one team, and I didn't have Britton Brown anywhere. But I know I at least thought after the first few weeks that I was looking at a split there. But yeah, Charbonnet definitely stepped up, and now you hear a lot of NFL buzz for Zach Charbonnet now too.
Yeah, congratulations to him. I mean, it worked out for him. It didn't work out for him in Michigan. That's what the transfer portal is all about. Speaking of the transfer portal, we might as well bring back an old segment for y'all who's been listening for quite a while. You'll be hearing a very familiar sound just right about now.
Time for transfer portal news.
All right, let's do some transfer portal news. Like I said at the beginning of the show, as soon as this season ended, transfer portal heated up immediately. Like we had some guys already in the portal just throughout the season, like guys like Taj Harris out of Syracuse kind of come to mind, but no like real earth-shattering news was really coming out. But now that the season is over, we're looking at some pretty major players already, like day one after the season, entering the portal, and there's really no other place to start except for Mr. Spencer Rattler, former quarterback of Oklahoma, former Heisman favorite, former projected number one overall pick, former so many different projected accolades for this man. He is now transferring out of Oklahoma. CK, I'm going to let you start off here. What are your thoughts on this, man?
We could see it was coming, right? He got passed up by Caleb Williams midseason. Caleb Williams looked better than Spencer Rattler. And then we heard Lincoln Riley surprisingly, I guess, left and took the job at USC. If anything, at least I thought it was going to be LSU, but he left. And then the next day, Spencer Rattler leaves with him. And so was it a surprise he left? No. Now the question is, where's he going to go? I've seen some people speculate on, going to SMU and following in Tanner Mordecai's footsteps, but I think Preston Stone is still probably at this point, you're going to give him a chance over Spencer Rattler, I would think. So I don't think that one makes a lot of sense. I'd love to speculate on like Western Kentucky, right? Like Bailey's Abbey, we saw how efficient it could be.
Hey, sorry about that, y'all. It looks like just a little technical difficulties, lost internet there for a second, but we're going to pick right back up here. CK, what were you saying about Spencer Rattler there as to where he was going?
I was saying I don't think it's going to be SMU, even if we want it to be. I would love to say Western Kentucky, but just knowing, or not knowing him personally, but from what I see, Spencer Rattler has an attitude that it has tended to rub people the wrong way. I'm not sure that he would buy in to Western Kentucky. I think he would still very much like to stay in the P5.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And I preferred candidates for Western Kentucky. I like Miles Brennan there. Harrison Bailey, I think, is another interesting one. Maybe there at Western Kentucky. I'm not too big of a fan of Spencer Rattler going there. But like, I think a team like Arizona State, I think, is an interesting one. Especially if Jaden Daniels moves on to the NFL this year. I don't think that's the current rumors or anything like that. But if he does, I think that'd be a spot Spencer Rattler might want to check out. I've heard a lot of people connect him to Ole Miss. If Lane Kiffin does indeed stay there another year, that could be a great like kind of rebound spot for him. But even still, like we kind of mentioned earlier, this is probably the biggest quarterback transfer of the year so far, unless there's really not one, unless there's one that just we'll find out about later. But this is definitely the one that's going to get the most headlines going forward. We'll hit up our second big transfer news, and this is the one that CK and I talked about this briefly before the pod, but this is the one that really we both agreed on. Out of the major players here, this is the one that kind of took us aback the most. And I'll start with this one. We got Jahmyr Gibbs, running back out of Georgia Tech, into the transfer portal. And the reason why this doesn't shock me, in more of, I think this is probably the one that says the most about the program that he is leaving that we didn't already know. So I had heard the rumors that Jahmyr Gibbs wasn't happy at Georgia Tech. I had heard the rumors that he was considering transferring out. I'm like, okay, that's going to be with a lot of big running backs and stuff like that maybe their team wasn't as successful this year. I've heard the same thing about Tank Bigsby at Auburn, stuff like that. I don't believe it until I see it. Well, now I have to believe it, and I have to see it because Jahmyr Gibbs is in the portal. And again, like I said, this to me says a lot about where Georgia Tech is at, because I'll be honest, I'm a Georgia fan, but I like Jeff Collins at Georgia Tech. Seemed to understand the ATL area pretty well. Was able to recruit some pretty good guys there. Jeff Sims, the quarterback they had there when he was healthy, was actually pretty great for this Georgia Tech offense. Jahmyr Gibbs was a hell of a find for them. I know Georgia was looking at Jahmyr Gibbs during recruiting season, but he went to Georgia Tech instead, played well for them, and then just this year, been up and down for him. And I think that's part of the reason why he might be entering the portal, because he just wasn't the main guy this year. So what do you think, CK? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs is definitely the most surprising name that hit the portal recently. And Georgia Tech just should have given him more carries, it seems like. Like, get the ball to him any way you can, carries, passes, something, because that seems to be, I think, what beyond that, I don't know what could have irritated him. Like you said, they did not play particularly well. We just saw them get absolutely destroyed by Georgia, which was to be expected because Georgia's doing that to a lot of people. As for where he goes, there's a lot of speculation I've seen on Tennessee. It makes sense. Like, we've seen a lot of people transfer out of Tennessee right now, but that's pre-Josh Heupel's offense. Although they just had, was it not Jabari Small, who was the running back who just entered the portal for them? Tyon Evans just entered the portal there, but that clears up a starting spot, you think, in front of Jabari Small. So Jabari Gibbs and Hendon Hooker in the same backfield. I think Hendon Hooker said he's coming back, so that would be a fun combo coming up here.
That would definitely be a fun one, and I don't blame Jahmyr Gibbs for going there. I definitely like the fit in that offense, especially as a receiving back. That's really where Jahmyr Gibbs really shines, is catching balls out of the backfield. I think he's going to be fantastic for the NFL once they get there to him. Another offense that I've been seeing more speculation of just like how great he would be in this offense rather than any kind of like actual tie-in for him going there. But Jahmyr Gibbs taking over the Tyler Beatty role at Mizzou next year. Oh my God. I am literally just like drooling thinking about that combination. If that does indeed happen, oh, that'd be incredible. But I think really the other kind of big thing here is, and I really think that I'm going to quote college football nerds here because I think they put it best here. bad teams are going to lose their best players to elite teams, and they're going to be trading them for an elite team's bench. And I think that's what happens. I think that's what's happening here. Jahmyr Gibbs realizes that Georgia Tech is not going to be the kind of program that gets him on the map in terms of NFL, because they're going to be losing constantly. He's not really been able to shine this year as much as he did his first year, and he wants to go somewhere that's going to utilize him. So I think that's what you're going to be seeing here. He's going to want to go to a program that's proven to work with guys like him. Again, we mentioned Tennessee, we mentioned Missouri, but honestly, I'm going to throw Alabama and Georgia in here. Even if they're both of their back, I mean, Georgia's backfield is loaded right now, but they're losing 2 guys to the NFL this year. They're probably going to lose at least 1 to the portal. So why not bring in a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs to kind of fill up some of that space? Alabama, their entire running back room is completely destroyed right now. We'll get to that when we get to the game preview. But they're going to want some guys coming in that are A, healthy, and B, bring a different skill set than just running the ball. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs provides that. So definitely a very interesting one to watch here, I think, going forward. We'll hit up another running back here. CK, I'll let you start off on this one. We got Jalen Berger, running back Wisconsin. Running back was at Wisconsin, now going to Michigan State. What are your thoughts here?
So I'm from Wisconsin, so I'm pretty close to this one. So I was a big fan of Jalen Berger. We saw in the shortened 2020, Wisconsin kind of decimated by COVID, but when we saw Jalen Berger play, he was running at about 5 yards per carry and looked like the next star running back at Wisconsin. Now it turns out it's Braylon Allen, but that was before. That had nothing to do with the fact that Jalen Berger was transferring. It wasn't because Braylon Allen passed him up. It was because there was clearly some off-field issues there with Coach Paul Chryst, and I can make speculation that I've seen, but I don't want to say that because I don't know that for sure. But I know that there was something going on with him and Paul Chryst, and he entered the portal. I did know that he took a visit to Michigan State, and there's some rumors about Rutgers, but Michigan State made the decision, was the decision. And we saw how successful they were with the transfer running back this year, right? Kenneth Walker came in from Wake Forest and is going to finish in the top 3 in the Heisman, 5 in the Heisman, somewhere in there, right? So you couldn't ask for a better transfer running back in. Can you expect that out of Jalen Berger? Probably not, but I think he can be pretty effective.
I mean, one thing I think is, again, turning the page towards next year in CFF, this is going to be somebody I think that a lot of people are going to be valuing very highly. Again, we saw what Michigan State did with Kenneth Walker this year. He's a top 10 running back, pretty much in all scoring formats that you've seen this year. So they want the next guy up. And a lot of people are going to look at Jalen Berger and say, oh, that's the guy right there. And I have no doubt that that's a possibility, but I do think people need to slow down just a little bit on the idea that Michigan State's going to just have another workhorse running back. Go back to the beginning of this year. It took Kenneth Walker a couple of games to really solidify himself as the workhorse running back. They started off the year, even though Kenneth Walker really clearly looked like the best running back almost immediately, the carries were a lot more split at the beginning of the year, and I think they're going to start off that way next year. And if Jalen Berger proves that he can be that guy like Kenneth Walker did this year, he'll be great down the stretch. But if he can't, and he's not separating himself from the pack, this could easily be a trap I think CFFers fall into next year. Again, nothing on Jalen Berger. I'm just saying that we can't just assume that he's going to recreate Kenneth Walker's production, because he might not be given that opportunity to do so if he doesn't separate himself like Walker did this year. Any other thoughts on this transfer before we move on?
Nope, I think you nailed it.
All right, cool beans. So we'll hit up one more. We got a running back, third running back here. No major wide receivers have hit the portal yet, so but I do have a few honorable mentions I'll list off here in a second. But even so, let's get to Mr. Zach Evans, running back out of TCU. Man, if y'all followed this recruiting story, like when it happened, again, as a Georgia fan, I was right in the middle of this, like trying to finding out up-to-date information on this. This dude was signed to Georgia. He signed his letter of intent to go to Georgia, and they had to go through some legal channels in order to release him from his letter of intent at Georgia. Things kind of fell apart between him and the coaching staff right there near the end. Georgia wanted him bad, but it's just, again, I don't like speculating on behavioral issues and stuff like that, but it's clear as day with Zach Evans. If you followed him at all, there's some stuff going on there. And really, even after dropped out of Georgia, you didn't see a ton of major programs go after him after that point. It's why he ended up at TCU, which credit to TCU. They took him in, and it looked like it might work out. Might have worked out for a little bit there, but just as the season kind of went on, or at the very least, worked out in the first year. During the COVID year, there wasn't really too much peep out of him in terms of like drama going on off the field. But really this year, once Darwin Barlow transferred out, and it was really just him and Kendre Miller there, you started to hear a bit more bubbling about Evans not being happy about being in this shared backfield, wanted to be the guy, and things just kind of fell apart, deteriorated as the season kind of went on. Clearly wasn't happy with Gary Patterson as coach, advocated for Deion Sanders to take over once Gary Patterson was out. Clearly that didn't work out, and now here he is just at the end of it all. Out in the portal, it's going to be very interesting to see who takes their shot on him next.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Like, as a recruit, this was a guy who Georgia, Alabama, Texas A&M, like you name those big SEC schools, and they were all interested. But now the question is, after showing, like, while he's been when we've seen him on the field, he looks good. The problem was, like, Gary Patterson didn't give him as many carries as I think, at least for a CFF standpoint, that we all wanted him to get. But when he's gotten the carries, he looks good out there still. So talent is still not in question here. But
no, not at all.
It's the character, it's the attitude. Who's going to be willing to take a chance on a guy like Zach Evans? Zach Evans is someone I could see having to go into the G5 to find a job.
See, I mean, I almost disagree with you a little bit, because I think because of that talent, because the fact that he's shown that despite his character issues, he will produce on the field no matter what, because he's just that talented. I could see a program that is, I would say, quote unquote, desperate at the running back position be willing to take a shot on him, especially if they promise him a good amount of carries. I'm not going to name any programs because none of them really come to mind in terms of like people that are, you have
Colorado
your coaches.
State?
Well, you have your coaches out there that care about character, and you have other coaches that are, a little bit more lenient with character. So maybe one of those programs where a coach isn't quite as harsh on character among his players might be willing to take a shot at him if they're at a P5 level. But I agree with you, at a G5 level, regardless of character or not, they're going to be way more likely to take a shot on him because he could be a game changer for any team that takes him at that level of football.
We saw what Jerome Ford did at Cincinnati, and that's probably the best of the P5 schools here, the G5 schools here. But if he could land in a case like that where, he's going to get carries. I said David Bailey at Colorado State, right? Like, just knowing he's getting carries, and you saw what he did. Like, Zach Evans could go to Colorado State and be great, I think. So,
oh yeah,
someone to watch.
Someone to watch. Definitely. Again, all of these guys are up here on this list for a reason. These are guys that we will be heavily, heavily watching. A couple names I want to throw out here, just as guys I'm keeping an eye on. But they're not really major. Like, they're not going to cause like a change in a program or anything like that. A couple wide receivers here. Theo Weiss out of Oklahoma entered the transfer portal today. Jake Bobo, I think he was wide receiver 1 at Duke this year. He is now in the portal. Cam Johnson, wide receiver out of Vanderbilt, entered the portal today. Sam Crawford, I believe he finished as the wide receiver 1 for Tulsa. I can't remember if it's him or if it was Santana. But he's in the portal. And then a couple of QBs here. I mean, Jack Miller's been in the portal for a couple days now, but I'll throw him out there, quarterback out of Ohio State. I don't think he's the last Ohio State quarterback that'll be entering the portal. I have to imagine that one of Kyle McCord or Quinn Ewers transfers, probably not now, but when it gets into the spring and they kind of really figure out who's that number 2 behind CJ Stroud, I think one of those guys will be entering the portal before the season is out. And then Gunnar Holmberg, starting quarterback out of Duke. He is now in the transfer portal. A couple of CFFers. We all know Gunnar Holmberg. Dude went off for a couple of weeks there and in the middle of the season. Kind of fell off as the season went on, but even still, those are just some names I'll be keeping an eye on just to see where they go. I think those are all very interesting names. Any of those names kind of stick out to you, CK, that you want to touch on?
I played Jake Bobo a few times in PPR. Like, you got a lot of, like you said, he was on Duke too, and you got a lot of passes thrown to him. So You mentioned like Charleston Rambo, right? And what he got in Miami. If Jake Bobo or even Theo Weiss got to a position where I felt like they could be wide receiver one in a high flying passing offense, which Duke was not, right? They just wanted to give the ball to Mateo Durant all the time. So if you put him on an offense where they throw the ball a lot, it could be interesting.
I agree 100%. Those two are definitely the top two I have on my list here as names to watch out for. Again, Jack Miller, again, he's another one that if he finds the right, like all these guys, if they find the right spot, they're going to be good, in my opinion. The four that we really talked about here are all the ones that, like, no matter where they go, they're going to be an impact on their program. But those are our transfer portal news for this week. This is not the only time we'll be talking about this. As the season goes on, there's going to be so many more big names hopping into that portal. We saw, like, what was it, like 2,000 players into the portal last year in, like, all of college football. Like, it was insane. Absolutely insanity. So
it's getting what they wanted it for, right? If you don't find playing time right away, hop in the portal, see what you can get. Like, that was the intention behind it, and it's working.
It is. And, like, again, for better or for worse, like, there's going to be, again, the transfer portal solves one problem. It's going to open up a whole bunch more. Is kind of my point about that. Like, it's going to solve a bunch of problems, but it's going to open up a whole can of worms that we didn't even see coming. But that's what happens when the landscape's shifting like it is. Speaking of shifting landscapes, college conference championships. Good Lord, I don't know why it's so hard for me to say that. Conference championships are this weekend. We got some big heavyweight matchups this year. I don't remember really, like, when I was typing all this out earlier today. I was typing this out earlier today. I was like, I don't remember there being this many, like, ranked v ranked matchups in, like, all these different conference championships. Because I looked, every Power 5 league has a ranked v ranked matchup this year. ACC or the AAC has a ranked v ranked matchup. The Mountain West has a ranked team in their conference championship. UTSA was almost ranked. Unfortunately, they lost this past weekend, and I imagine they will not be in the college football playoff bowl this week. But yeah, guys, we got a ton of great games, and really there's no other place to start than the heavyweight matchup in the SEC. We got Georgia, number 1 Georgia, number 4 Alabama, the 4 p.m. game on CBS. Georgia, a 6.5 point favorite here. CK, so I don't sound like a homer, I'm going to let you start this one off.
Oh, you don't have to sound like a homer, but Georgia they're putting up a historic defense, right? We've seen the historic defense all year. It was on display shutting out Georgia Tech this past weekend. And Alabama looks beatable, right? They look beatable for a change. Not only have they lost once, they took double or triple overtime, was it in the end, to sneak by Auburn, and quadruple overtime. Yeah. You lose track with those 2-point conversion plays. They go so fast. So quadruple overtime to beat Auburn. And Georgia comes in as the favorite. I would pick Georgia to win this game. I've seen enough Alabama this year to know that their defense struggles in the middle of the field. And we mentioned the tight end, and we've seen the running plays from Georgia. Like, this is not the typical Alabama defense that we've seen in past years.
I mean, God, as a Georgia fan, like, I'm jaded, man. I'm jaded. You're looking at this matchup and you're seeing all these things just pointing to the fact that Georgia should win this game and win it handily. This is a matchup nightmare for Alabama. Georgia has one of the best, if not the best defensive line they faced all year, and Alabama has struggled against some lesser defensive lines than Georgia's, even though they're good defensive lines. Georgia just has a mismatch here. Alabama's right side of the offensive line has become a liability for them. Auburn was taking advantage of it the entire game. I don't know what Bill O'Brien's doing with Bryce Young right now, where he has them stuck in this, like, pre-snap check that is requiring so much time to be wasted off the clock, allowing defenses to read where the gaps are in the offensive line before the snap is even put out there. Bryce Young being forced to pass constantly. Like, I get it. Bryce Young, it was the number 1 recruit in his class for a reason. Like, I get it. You want to rely on him. But because of that, and you have holes at the offensive line, he's going to get sacked a ton in this kind of game. Add in the fact that Alabama's running back room completely decimated. The only healthy running back they have right now, and healthy is a stretch, is Trey Sanders. And he's coming back from a car crash. That's all they got left. Jalen McClellan out. Kamar Wheaton, out. Brian Robinson got injured this past weekend. Like, Bama is struggling there. And they're already going to have a hard time running the ball against the Georgia defensive line. They only got one scholarship running back now for this game. And this is going to force them to become one-dimensional. You put Bryce Young back there to pass a lot, holes in the offensive line, Georgia's pass rush. It's really hard to see Alabama winning this game with that kind of attitude. Now, as a Georgia fan, I have to say, how does Alabama win this game? Well, the secret thing about Georgia's defense is that it's all the front seven. The secondary is probably the biggest liability for Georgia on their on the defensive side of the ball. And it's been covered up by a great front seven that has pressured quarterbacks, that has forced them to make bad throws. And they're still a good secondary. Don't get me wrong. Like, Georgia could be doing a lot worse, especially if they didn't bring Darion Kendrick in from the transfer portal this offseason, stuff like that. Like, you're talking about, like, Georgia could be in a lot, like, that could be an even bigger weakness for Georgia this offseason. But Alabama, especially when they have Jamison Williams out there, I think Jamison Williams could be, and has been for Alabama, a game changer for them. If he can break away like Jalen Waddle did against Georgia last year for a couple of those long touchdowns, and Alabama's able to sustain a few more drives against Georgia, this game could be a bit more interesting than we're being led to believe. But at the end of the day, as much as, like, I want to hedge against Georgia, even though I love Georgia, but, like, I know what happens in these scenarios. Like, there's almost no reason not to take Georgia in this matchup. I forgot to mention this. I have all of the preseason predictions that Xavier and I made before the season started. Both of us picked Georgia versus Alabama for the SEC Championship game. Xavier predicted Georgia to win. I predicted Alabama in the preseason, and part of me says you should stick with it. But again, you can't not see what's been going on with these two teams. Georgia looks like the dominant team in college football right now, and it's really just hard to bet against them. So you got to go dogs here.
Oh yeah, I'm taking Georgia in this game all day. The matchup is perfect. You mentioned it. Yes, I would agree wholeheartedly that Georgia's weakness is the secondary, and if Alabama can hit 2-3 big plays with Mechie or Jamison Williams, or Ja'Cory Brooks had a nice, I think he was the one who made the touchdown catch at the end of the game to send it into overtime. Like, they still have the talent at receiver that they always have out there. But you have to be able to get them that far downfield, right? You have to be able to get downfield against them. And Georgia's pass rush has been dominant, and Alabama's offensive line has not been this year. So Auburn, was it 5 or 6 sacks against him last week? And that's just not something you're used to seeing out of an Alabama offensive line. They said the defense does not look like an Alabama defense. So I think as a Georgia fan, dude, you should feel pretty confident.
Also, breaking news here. Transfer portal update here. We got another big name in the portal here. DeMonte Trayanum, Arizona State running back, is in the portal, which that is a shock to me because I thought Rachaad White would be going off to the NFL this year, and he would be lined up for a massive role next year. CK, what are your thoughts on this? Like, just on air right now, what do you think?
I would have thought exactly like you did. That I thought we saw Rachaad White look incredible down the stretch, really, like quietly excellent. And I would have thought he's going to the NFL. DeMonte Trayanum steps into that same role, fills in. They throw a lot of passes to the running back there too, which is really how Rachaad White picks up a lot of his chunk yardage. But I wonder where that's a tough one, because I've never even heard whispers of him being upset.
This is a shocker to me. I'm not gonna lie.
We at least heard lately that Jahmyr Gibbs, or I could see why Jahmyr Gibbs was upset. Even if I didn't expect him to transfer, I could see why. I no idea why DeMonte Trayanum would be upset with Arizona State when you think he's going to step into a larger role. So
the only thing I could see there is either maybe they're bringing somebody in, which might be interesting, or Daniel Ngata, their freshman running back from this year. Maybe he's getting a bit more buzz than we're being led to believe. But even so, that's just some breaking news analysis right there. We'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming here now. We're moving on into our next conference game. We're going to go ahead and move over to the Big Ten. Preseason predictions on this game. I had Ohio State versus Iowa. Xavier had Ohio State versus Wisconsin. Both of us were so close to being perfect on this. Really came down to the last week, but really the big story here, Michigan. Michigan playing for their first Big Ten title. Defeating Ohio State for the first time in 10 years. Now they're here. Iowa gets here on behalf of Wisconsin, blowing a game against Minnesota last. CK, I can tell you're not very happy to talk about that.
Yeah, so I'm a Wisconsin fan, so they had it all right in front of them, and Graham Mertz, man, I had such high hopes. I've seen a lot of not very talented quarterbacks come through Wisconsin and play pretty well because of their running game, and Graham Mertz, man, it is rough watching it sometimes.
It's just so shocking because he performed so well with his first start, and then it's just been downhill ever since then. This is the number 2 versus number 15. Michigan is a 10.5 point favorite here. This will be the 8 p.m. game on Fox. Again, Michigan's riding high. You got to feel like they're riding high after that Ohio State loss or Ohio State win. They're now in position, really probably going to be the number 2 team in the playoff poll tomorrow, if not number 3 probably. If for some reason they decide to put Bama ahead of them, despite the fact that Michigan clearly has a better win out of them too. But even still, I'm having a hard time looking at this game and not seeing a way for Michigan to win this game. Michigan's defense clearly has been their story, but their offense, especially Hassan Haskins as of late, has been the story for them. So they're going to put up points really on almost anybody. Iowa's defense is good, but I don't expect them to shut down what Michigan's able to do. CK, do you see a route for Iowa to win this one? Maybe spring a surprise upset here during conference championship week?
Well, when we first saw Iowa's defense to start the year, they just looked dominant, right? And that's when Iowa got up into the top 5 before they got beat by Purdue. Number 2, yeah, before they got beat by Purdue. But it was so based around turnovers. They were forcing an unbelievable number of turnovers, which caught up to them. And suddenly Spencer Petras had to march the field, and it didn't look pretty, right? They should have lost last week to Nebraska.
Yep.
They should have lost last week to Nebraska easily, but Nebraska found a way to lose yet again, which they've done well this season. So as far as Iowa goes, if you force some turnovers, can you hang in there? Yeah, they could. But if it's just Iowa's offense versus Michigan's defense, I don't see Iowa's offense moving the ball well. And at this point, they rely on the turnovers. So I think Hassan Haskins he's looked great lately. There's a reason Zach Charbonnet transferred. We mentioned him, right? And Haskins has proven that he's great. And Blake Corum seems to be getting healthier. So we haven't even seen him in a while.
We have not.
He got 2 carries.
I would say he played a little bit last week, but clearly they didn't need him. Once Hassan Haskins got going last week, he just ran all over Ohio State. Again, you're talking about turnovers. The only way I could see Iowa really getting a chance in this game is they have to stop the run from Michigan. Otherwise, if Michigan's never going to put the ball in the air and worry about Iowa creating turnovers that way. So they're going to have to stuff the run, force Michigan to pass, maybe to create some turnovers that way. Otherwise, I see no chance for this. Michigan, as far as I'm concerned, Michigan is going to the playoff for the first time.
Well earned for them too.
Oh, absolutely.
It's been a long time with a lot of criticism, and that they were probably 1 year away from Harbaugh not having a job there, and a lot of people didn't want him to have a job going into this year. So vindication for Michigan fans.
Guilty. I was saying, I don't understand how Harbaugh still has a job. But he took the pay cut this year and said, give me 1 more year effectively. And well, he's earned it.
Made the most of it.
Absolutely. We'll see if they continue past this year. But like I said, as far as I'm concerned, Michigan's going to the playoffs. Well earned. We'll head up the Big 12 championship now. Xavier and I completely whiffed on this one. We had Oklahoma versus Iowa State. Pretty much exactly the same as almost everybody in the preseason. Maybe a couple people were hyping up Texas. Maybe they make it. They did not. But regardless of what we predicted, we got number 9 Baylor versus number 5 Oklahoma State. By the way, if you're confused, I'm using the AP polls because the playoff poll for this week have not come out yet. So if you're wondering what I'm saying or what those numbers are, it's AP poll. Number 9 Baylor versus number 5 Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State a 5-point favorite. Noon game on ABC. CK, I'll let you start off on this one. What do you got?
It's a big game for Oklahoma State, right? They just went out and won Bedlam, and now if they win this game, could they get into the playoff? They're the one who's got a chance to make it into the playoff. They've got the the one loss earlier in the season, but they said they just had a nice win the last week. Spencer Sanders is starting to really look pretty good after a career of kind of highs and lows. He's starting to look a little bit more consistent here, whereas Baylor's playing for like a better bowl positioning, better bowl seating, I suppose. And they just were able to hold off Texas Tech in what I thought was a surprising game. So Baylor is not exactly playing their best football, whereas I think Oklahoma State is peaking at the right time.
I'm not going to disagree with a single thing you said there. Oklahoma State, I think, really is a team that knows how to capitalize, knows how to win close games, find the opportunities to get themselves ahead. Because go back with Oklahoma State, they have won a lot of close games, and the only loss they have so far was Iowa State. They lost a close game, and for the most part, when they get into those close games, they, like I said, they know when to capitalize. Spencer Sanders, like you said, very consistent thus far. I think he's probably this is not his final year. I don't know whose final year it is anymore, thanks to all these COVID and transfer rules and stuff like that. I don't know how many years people have left anyway. But even so, I'd say probably he's playing his best football of his career right now. The interception against Oklahoma last week wasn't great, but again, you can't ask for perfection. In terms of playoff impact going on here, I got a lot of people, or I'm seeing a lot of like talk shows and stuff like that talking about like, would a 2-loss Bama get in over Oklahoma State? And I say with an emphatic hell no. Hell no. Nothing against Bama. Bama, if it was a Bama of the past, like, and they weren't struggling as much as they were, and they just happened to lose 2 fluke games, one in the SEC Championship, one in the regular season, I would maybe consider it, but they've struggled against some relatively just average teams in the SEC. And Oklahoma State is finishing off the season here with win against Baylor, win against Oklahoma, win against Baylor. And I think the week before they played another ranked team. Like Oklahoma State's finishing off the season extremely well here, getting some great wins under the belt. I have no clue how they're left out of the playoff if it is indeed Georgia, Michigan, probably Cincinnati if they win. I think Oklahoma State takes that spot. I don't see a world where that doesn't happen if Alabama loses to SEC.
The only thing that kept Alabama from being on the radar more for like ugly wins was Oklahoma kept pulling off those ugly wins. We kept saying, what's wrong with Oklahoma? They keep finding a way to win. Alabama was doing that a lot too. They have, like I said, certainly not been the dominant Alabama team. So, I would, and it'd be good for college football. Like, get some new blood in there, right? Oklahoma State, I think it would be great to get them into the college football playoff.
The idea of having a playoff that doesn't include Bama, Oklahoma, Clemson, or Ohio State, I think is a welcome idea for a lot of college football fans. Now, I've already seen some people being like, "Oh, that wouldn't be the case because Georgia is the same old every year." I'm like, Georgia's made the playoff once, y'all. Like Georgia. Now, if Georgia didn't have to play Bama every year or didn't have to play in the SEC every year, I'm sure they would be in the playoff every single year. But even still, like Georgia had, like, as I'm reminded constantly by Georgia's rivals, we haven't won a national title in 41 years. Like, we are, quote unquote, new blood here for this playoff. But like you said, Oklahoma State getting in there would be huge. I think for the Big 12 as well, because you're talking about not having to rely on a brand like Oklahoma or Texas that gets them into the national conversation. I think that would be huge going forward because, again, Big 12 has to kind of figure out its identity after Oklahoma and Texas leave. I think this would go a long way towards helping that.
Oklahoma State could be the team that leads them forward as we go forward here. I do think that Baylor, I wonder how much they're worried about Dave Aranda taking a new job too, because
they just gave him an extension, did they not?
Oh, did they? I didn't see that.
Yeah, I think, or at least they're in the process of giving him an extension.
Oh, that's good, because otherwise you got to be thinking about, like, are we playing our last job here? We've a lot of speculation about Matt Campbell, right, and Iowa State. So a lot of those Big 12 coaches that have stepped up this year, that it'd be good to keep Baylor. It'd be good for Dave Aranda to stay for Baylor instead of taking the job going back to LSU.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Again, big game there. Oklahoma State, if they win it out there, I think they're going to the playoff unless Bama beats Georgia in the SEC Championship, which that would just be terrible luck for the Big 12. We'll go ahead and move on to the last not the last Power 5 Conference Championship. I'm not even close. Anyway, we got number 10 Oregon versus number 14 Utah. Utah, the 2.5-point favorite here. 8 p.m. game on ABC. pretty much like we're right back where we were 2 weeks ago when Oregon played Utah, and that was a shocker for a lot of people. Oh, by the way, before I go any further, Xavier and I nailed this. We both picked Utah versus Oregon. He picked Utah versus Oregon. Didn't get there the same way we thought we would, because after Utah starting off like 1-2 to start the year, I thought that prediction was debunked, but here we are. Anyway, like I said, 2 weeks ago, we're right at the start of where we thought we're pretty much right in the same spot. Utah slightly favored. It was a shocking game for a lot of people, not in that Oregon lost, just the way that they lost, the absolute domination that Utah put down on them. Once Oregon fell behind, they really just couldn't get anything going. So the question now is an old adage in college football. It's hard to beat a team twice. And so here we got a rematch just 2 weeks later. CK, what do you think, man? Do you think Oregon's able to pull off the upset again this time?
I think Oregon is a team that needs to play from in front. I think when they fall behind early, they're so run heavy, and it's not bad, but it's hard for them to catch up. And so when Utah wants to play physical, pound your face mouth, like pound it in the face football, right? Like Tavion Thomas lately has been incredible. They just run it right down your throat. That's the Utah way. And Oregon is quite different than that. Like instead of physical football, theirs is more finesse and speed, which we've seen they've turned that into national championships too, right? Like it's worked for them. Yep. But when you fall down early to that, it's hard for them to like make it back up. So I think it will be a closer game this time for sure. I think Oregon will be better prepared, but Oregon didn't look great last week in it's not the Civil War anymore, civil conflict or whatever they're calling it now against Oregon State. They did win, but it was not a dominant performance in a game that they should have had a dominant performance. You'd have liked to look a little better than that. They did get Travis Dye going a little bit, but I think Utah still wins. I think it's a much better game than what we saw 2 weeks ago.
I'm kind of with you. I'm going to take Utah to win again this time. Again, I'm fully bought into the idea that it's hard to beat a team twice in college football, but there's nothing really on Oregon's team that's like no major injured players coming back, no like scheme changes in the past 2 weeks that have really kind of told me that saying, oh, Oregon's a different team now than when they played against Utah last time. And really the undersold side of this, in my opinion, for Utah is like, again, we talk about Tavion Thomas, deservedly. But they got a pretty decent passing game when they need to. Cameron Rising has really kind of changed things up for them very well. With Charlie Brewer kind of transferring out, losing his starting job there. But even so, they got some receiving weapons like Brent Kuth, Britton Covey, Kincaid, Devon Vele, all these different guys that really just giving them options through the air whenever Tavion Thomas can't get going. So I think that, again, I agree with you. We'll see a closer game than the last one that we saw, but I still think Utah has enough firepower to put away Oregon, and I think Utah goes to the Rose Bowl. So go ahead and move on here. Let's hit up the ACC. We got oh my God, I lost my spot. Number 17, Pittsburgh versus number 18, Wake Forest, 8 p.m. game on ABC. I have something wrong there because I have two games at 8 p.m. at ABC.
The Oregon, I can help you with that one. The Oregon-Utah game is on Friday night.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes so much sense. Thank you for that. So anyway, number 18, Wake Forest, number 17, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, the 3-point favorite here. CK, you get us started on this one. What do you got?
Pittsburgh, right? They're coming on behind Kenny Pickett, who's breaking all the passing records at Pittsburgh here down the stretch. And for years we've seen this is just the Wake Forest game, right? On the Atlantic side of the ACC, but Wake Forest had a 10-win season. They have this incredible offense with a very underrated defense. I think it's very underrated, but when their offense is rolling, like Sam Hartman and throwing it to A.T. Perry and Jakiri Roberson, I think Christian Beal-Smith is getting healthier too. So I like Wake Forest. I like Pittsburgh. We've seen all year. This is a conference that's been dominated by offense, right? Not a whole lot of defense, but if there is a couple teams that have played defense, it's Wake Forest has played some in games when they've relied on the run, they can play some defense. NC State has played some pretty good defense all year, and Pittsburgh's actually played a little bit of defense. So I think it's still going to be a very high scoring game.
Oh, extremely high.
I actually like Pitt in this one though, because I'm not sure what stops Jordan Addison. at this point. Like the Kenny Pickett to Jordan Addison connection, I said Wake Forest has Sam Hartman and Jahmyr Roberson and A.T. Perry, but at this point, I've just bought in on Jordan Addison.
I mean, I'm kind of with you here. I think Pittsburgh is the better overall team. I think Wake Forest's offense is actually better than Pitt's offense. I like just a wide variety of pieces that they have there. But I really do like this line. -3 points for Pitt. Over under of 72.5. That's exactly the kind of game I'm expecting here. Both of these teams getting into the 30s, if not the 40s. Classic. I say classic, but just the kind of ACC games we've really been seeing all year with these two. This is going to be a entertaining as heck game on Saturday night. For those who maybe don't want to watch the lower scoring affair of that Michigan-Iowa is probably going to be. This is where the fireworks are probably going to be. But yeah, I'm gonna be with you. I'm gonna lean towards Pitt here, mostly because I think when they need to play defense, I've seen them get that going a little bit better than when Wake Forest has needed it. I'll also throw out here again, preview for this year. Like everybody else in the world, we predicted Clemson, and both of us predicted Clemson to be here. And then I predicted UNC to be here. Xavier predicted Miami to be here. So we were both wrong. We completely whiffed on this conference. Anything else you want to say about this before we head on to the next one?
If you have not seen Wake Forest play, it is a fun system, and they also just extended their coach. I saw Dave Clawson's got an extension. So yeah, that's all I got on that one.
Very, very nice. And again, a lot of players there that are probably going to be huge CFF assets going into next year, especially if Sam Hartman returns. So those are all the Power 5 ones. Let's move on to the Group of 5 ones. We spread the love around here. We're going to hit up all of these different conferences. But we got one ranked v ranked matchup in the Group of 5, and that's going to be number 16 Houston versus number 3 Cincinnati. Cincinnati a 10.5 point favorite here. 4 p.m. game on Fox. So with everybody basically taking care of themselves, if Cincinnati wins, they're going to be the first Group of 5 team in the college football playoff. I don't think there's a single way the committee can really justify keeping them out at this point, especially punctuating the end of this season with a ranked win over a surprisingly great Houston team who has quietly had one of the best passing defenses in the country. Clayton Tune and that offense has really gotten going in a lot of different games. There's just a lot you gotta like about this game. In terms of how we did preseason, both Xavier and I predicted Cincinnati to get here because we saw how many pieces were coming back. We both whiffed on who they'd be facing. I thought SMU would be here, which going throughout most of the season looked like that was going to be the case. And then Xavier picked Tulsa. Love Xavier. Not sure what was going through your mind on that one, bud. But even still, again, this to me is going to be one of the, I think this is going to be one of the better games. I think Houston has a legitimate shot to beat Cincinnati here. Again, that passing defense has been really, really good for them. Their rushing defense, while not as good, still very good. I think they can keep this low scoring and make it to where just a couple of big plays either way can decide the whole thing. What do you think, CK?
Yeah, I think Houston dropped their very first game of the year. It was either Texas or Texas Tech. I think it was Texas Tech that got them the very first game of the year, and then they've reeled off 11 straight wins, including, like you said, they beat SMU in there, right? They handled Memphis pretty well, which is a pretty tough game in there. They beat Navy, which you never know what you're going to get. So they have some solid wins, and you mentioned it, right? Like we know that with Clayton too, and their offense can get going too. He's looked really good. He was injured for a while in the middle of the season, but he's gotten going the last few weeks, and he looks like the guy that we thought he was going to be. Mm-hmm. Alton McCaskill, right? Like the runs game is there too. Like they can run it a little bit. So I'm very impressed with Houston. Now Cincinnati, the difference is I think Cincinnati has the defense, right? Like Houston has a good defense. Cincinnati has arguably maybe the second best defense behind Georgia in the country right now. Mm-hmm. They have that type of skill set. So I'll stick to Cincinnati, but I do think it's going to be a very competitive game. Whereas we've seen the last few weeks, Cincinnati has finally started to do what we thought they needed to do, which is blow some teams out. I don't think they're blowing out a Houston team.
I agree with you 100%. Again, I'm going to lean Cincinnati here. If I was a betting man, I probably would take Houston plus the points. Again, 10.5 just seems like a bit too fat of a line for me there. Especially, like, I could see Cincinnati winning by 10, but again, it's 10.5. So I'd probably take the points there because I just like where that number is at. But it's not a betting show. The one last thing I wanted to talk about here, again, I briefly mentioned when we first started this game preview that Cincinnati wins, they're into the playoffs. But with everybody else in college football struggling as much as they are, Alabama might come into next weekend with 2 losses. Ohio State is going to have 2 losses. Oklahoma State, they're going to have 1 loss, but if they lose to Baylor, they're going to have 2 losses. If enough chaos happens, does Cincinnati get into the playoff regardless of how this game turns out?
Well, one of Georgia and Alabama gets in, right? So we expect it to be Georgia. I think that if, like you say, Michigan loses and some of that other stuff happens, I think Notre Dame probably gets a spot, right? Notre Dame quietly, I think they're 5th or 6th right now in that poll. I think they still get a spot. 6th?
Yeah.
6th. So, yeah, I think they still will get a spot then if Michigan were to lose and Alabama gets handled well and some of that other stuff happens. But there is certainly a chance that if some massive chaos happens this week, like Cincinnati has a pretty good win against Notre Dame, right? They have some pretty good wins against Notre Dame, whereas we mentioned like Alabama's looked okay. They've looked okay at times. Oklahoma State has like a good win or 2 in there. So you could certainly make the case that Cincinnati has every bit the resume at this point. Now they don't have the week-to-week wins, and that's always what they have to argue with, right? But they have big wins. That even when they scheduled Indiana, they didn't. Going into the year, we thought Indiana was going to be pretty good, and it just turned out they weren't, which sucked for Cincinnati's resume. But yeah, that Notre Dame win comes back.
I've heard the playoff committee did kind of change their tune about schedules a little bit over the past couple of years, especially when it came to G5 schedules. They said that they were going to really take into account intent of scheduling rather than like how that win actually looks on the resume, if that makes sense. Because they know that it's not going to be the G5 team's fault if they go out and schedule, like if they went and scheduled Clemson before this year and they would have played Clemson this year. Clemson's kind of a bit down compared to regular years. So it's not the G5's fault that Clemson's not as good of a win this year as they would be. Or like say like they scheduled Florida State like 10 years ago. And they're like, alrighty, Florida State, that's going to be a great win for us if we ever get that. And then they get to Florida State now and it's just like, oh, they didn't even make a bowl game this year. Oof. But yeah, I agree with you. I just want to kind of throw that out there because again, I think there's just enough chaos really could happen to where Cincinnati makes it in undefeated or not. We'll head up another game here. We got the Mountain West. We got Utah State versus number 19 San Diego State. San Diego State a 6-point favorite here. This will be the 3 p.m. game on Fox. I believe this is on Friday as well, if I remember that correctly. Are we losing internet again?
You're skipping on me.
Okay. Yeah, I lost internet, or I got weak internet connection there for a second. Sorry about that, y'all. Anyway, we'll continue. We'll just keep on going here. Utah State, San Diego State, 3 p.m. game on Fox. I believe this is a Friday night game for the Mountain West. The thing that, okay, also again, preseason prediction, I had Nevada versus Wyoming. Xavier had Nevada versus Boise State. Whiffed on both of that. But like, nobody could blame us because nobody in this conference really wanted to win. Like every time one of these teams felt like they grabbed the division lead, they found a way to flounder it, and it just happens to be that San Diego State and Utah State were just the survivors at the end of the day. So, CK, you start us off. What do you think about this game?
If you haven't seen Utah State play yet, watch them. They have one of the more unique offensive styles that there is, where they line up their guys so wide on the field, their receivers, and Devin Tompkins is incredible for them, but Brandon Bowling is good for them too. And Logan Bonner gets the ball around and he's super tough. Like I've watched a few games this year where I thought, dude, this guy, because I've rostered Logan Bonner on quite a few CFF teams and he'd get hurt. Oh, yeah. He'd be limping around and I'd be like, oh geez, I'm never going to win. And he'd just keep toughing it out. Like, so Utah State's fun team to watch. Now San Diego State is almost the opposite in that they just pound the rock and they want to run the ball and they run it as much as they can.
They're murder ball to the extreme.
So it's worked, right? They've only lost one game this year. They dropped a game to Fresno State, right? Yeah. So it's a clash of systems, right? So we will see which one works better, whether it is Utah State and the wide open spread or San Diego State and, like you said, the murder ball. So I think because I've seen San Diego State put together some pretty good wins. They beat Nevada recently. They beat Boise State. I think I'll take San Diego State in this game.
Yeah, I'm going to take San Diego State as well. And like, as much as like I don't want to root for the team that I think is like less entertaining to watch, like you said, they've beaten teams that kind of or heavy passing teams like Utah State in the past year. Their passing defense is one of the best in the group of five, if not the country. You're talking about just a bad matchup there for Utah State. Utah State doesn't have a running back that you can really look at and say, oh, he can take over the game if Utah State needs him to. I think his name's Calvin Tyler. He's nice. He's fine. But like Utah State always has been able to score through the air. San Diego State's able to shut that down. I like them in this game.
I think San Diego State, didn't they beat Utah earlier in the year? I think
did.
They got a Utah win, right? Yeah, so that's
like one of the first.
That's an impressive win.
I would definitely agree. Yeah, especially since Utah turned it around after that point.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, that was one of the ones that they dropped, but that was a first ranked game, I'm pretty sure, and it went into overtime. I remember watching that game. So yeah, San Diego State has some impressive wins, and if you can beat a Utah team that we were just talking about, we think can beat Oregon, like you can beat a Utah State team.
I would definitely agree, 100%. Let's go. So the ACC matchup was probably going to be the highest scoring matchup of the weekend. But let's be real, this game's going to be probably right behind them. We're in the CUSA. We got Western Kentucky versus UTSA, 7 p.m. game on CBS Sports Network. This will be the 7 p.m. game Friday night. Western Kentucky, a 1.5-point favorite here. Preseason expectations, I had UTSA in this game, but I had Marshall. I didn't expect Western Kentucky to be this good. Xavier nailed it. He had UTSA versus Western Kentucky. I believe he had UTSA winning the whole thing. I expect this to be a complete, like, almost carbon copy of their clash earlier this season. Both of these teams hitting 40 points. No defense played in this game. This is going to be the fun game for you just to watch on a Friday night. What do you think, CK?
Yeah, this is going to be the one that you should tune in to watch it because it's going to be up and down the field. Western Kentucky with Bailey Zappi in his last game before the bowl, and then on to whatever he's going to do. But at Jarrett Stearns, I know he kind of disappointed that last week for CFF purposes, but he's been great all year. They throw the ball over the field. It is a fun team to watch. And then UTSA, they did not get the undefeated season, right? This last week, they got tripped up by North Texas. So that was disappointing because we wanted to see a third undefeated team, but it didn't happen. But still a good year, right? There are still lots to be proud of. I know Frank Harris got hurt at halftime. Did you see what the status is on that? Because I did not.
I have not seen anything on Frank Harris so far.
Yeah, so that's their quarterback, right? And we want to see it. I know he did not play the second half, so we want him to get out there and see Frank Harris, Sincere McCormick, Zachary Franklin, see that offense rolling like they can do. And then you said we've seen these two teams play once before this year, and it was fun. Now, I think I would probably say it's going to be Western Kentucky. Now, the last team that handed them a loss was UTSA, which was, I think, 52-46. So, but Western Kentucky's been on a great run since then. It seems to have really came together for them. So I think I'll take Western Kentucky at this game too.
I'm going to take Western Kentucky to win the rematch here. Like you said, without Frank Harris, I don't see real UTSA. If even a hobbled Frank Harris, I think, is going to limit UTSA enough here. Although Western Kentucky's run defense is just not great. So maybe Sincere McCormick absolutely takes over the game for them. But even so, I'm with you. Western Kentucky, especially with Bailey Zappi starting to get a little bit of NFL buzz, not like first round or anything like that, but, people starting to look at him and saying, hey, this guy kind of came out of nowhere now. We want to take a look at him. He's going to want to show off in this kind of game. So I think he'll be absolutely looking to put up plenty of points. I think Western Kentucky takes the W home in this one. We got CUSA. We're now moving on to the MACtion. Preseason expectations. Xavier and I both had Kent State versus Western Michigan. Like I said, I was high on Caleb Ellaby. I whiffed on that. Western Michigan just wasn't quite as good as I expected them to be. Kent State was every bit that I thought they were going to be. Terrible defense, awesome offense, and that offense carried them throughout the season. And here they are. Really, the surprise here to me is the Northern Illinois Huskies, and they really they beat Georgia Tech early on in the year. And then from there, they just rode a series of very, very close games, almost all the way to this point. And here they are. So, CK, what are you thinking here, man?
Yeah, and Northern Illinois just dropped their last game last week to Western Michigan, where they got beat fairly handily, which is not what you want as you go ready to go into a conference championship game. But Northern Illinois has been the surprise team for me too. I would say that Kent State has done exactly what I thought, and like you said, they score a lot of points. They don't play much defense, but it has been more Marquez Cooper running the ball and what's the other? Xavier Williams running the ball. I thought it would just be Dustin Crum the whole time, and it hasn't been. He's been a big part of it, but it's not been just him. It's going to be a typical action game. It's not going to be as much offense, I don't think, as Western Kentucky and UTSA, but there should be a lot of offense in this game. I think it's a tough one for me to pick this game because you never know what you're going to get with action. We just saw Kent State go to overtime to win by 1 against Miami. So I think I'll take Kent State, though. I think I'm going to take Kent State.
So I got a lot of players I like on Northern Illinois. Trayvon Rudolph is going to be one of my favorite players going into next year. Absolutely exploded as the season kind of went on here. Disappointing last week during championship week, and I felt bad for a lot of people because I told them, like, yeah, Trayvon Rudolph should have a great week last week. He did not. But like you said, I'm kind of with you. Both of these teams have bad defenses. Kent State, really the passing defense, one of the worst in the country, but NIU's rushing defense is one of the worst in the country. And like you said, Kent State's identity has become Dustin Crum running the ball, Marquez Cooper running the ball, Xavier Williams running the ball. I think with that three of a tandem, I think they're able to find more points by the end of the night, even if Trayvon Rudolph and I think Rocky Lombardi will be back to play for this game, if I remember off the top of my head. I think he was held out last week. I think he'll be back for this one. Even if they're able to connect through the air, I think Kent State finds a way to get more points at the end of the day.
That's all it is ever in action, right? Who can get the most points by the end?
I mean, that's every football game if you're really going to break it down. Alrighty, so we got one last conference championship game to hit up here. We got Appalachian State, a 3-point favorite, versus Louisiana, 3:30 game on ESPN. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little shocked that App State's the favorite here. Especially considering how it went for them last time. Louisiana absolutely just rolled them. Now, Louisiana also kind of had the Iowa syndrome where it was a ton of turnovers, a lot of short field position. They were just able to take advantage of that. I don't imagine that'll happen again here. But even still, you got Billy Napier. He's on his way out. Got a lot of guys for Louisiana, I think, that are looking to probably boost their stock, either in the eyes of the NFL, but also I think I wouldn't be shocked if we see maybe some of these guys at Louisiana probably take their shot at the transfer portal, maybe transfer up. So I think they're going to have plenty to play for here. Appalachian State definitely has looked like a better team the past couple of weeks after their loss to Louisiana. I don't know. Again, the surprising thing to me was, again, App State being here, Coastal Carolina not. Both Xavier and I had Coastal Carolina in here over App State. We both predicted Louisiana here. But it really, Coastal Carolina season fell apart when Grayson McCall got knocked out for a couple of weeks, and that's when they took a couple L's. What do you think about this, CK? What are you expecting here?
Yeah, I think you're spot on, dude. I think App State being favored is like the history of Appalachian State being taken into account here because they've won the last two, or I think the only two, as far as conference championship games go. So what we've seen on the field is Louisiana's looked like a better team all year than App State. And when they played each other, it was, like you said, it was a dominant performance. So I think that App State, just kind of like the Oregon-Utah game, I think App State probably keeps it closer this time. But it's also a home game for Louisiana, right? It is at their park. So
I think so.
I think I will take Louisiana again. If nothing else, like win one for Billy Napier on the way out, right? Like we've seen him, how good he's going. He's going to go play for Florida. I think that's always hard because they either get up for your coach that's leaving and say like, we're showing off one more time, or it can be a little bit of a letdown, but I think that they get up and play even better.
If this was another big transfer portal announcement.
Man, we're just breaking news left and right.
Jadon Hazelwood, wide receiver out of Oklahoma, just entered the transfer portal. So that's another big one. I don't really know where he would go. I thought he would be one of the ones to try to stay at Oklahoma, try to take advantage of whoever they hire next. But Who knows?
So Bob Stoops is going to be coaching a bunch of walk-ons
I know.
in this bowl game that's coming up, man. Like, who's left?
No joke. Anyway, back to this game again. You're right. It's hard to tell in terms of like if it's the coach's last game, does the team get up or do they just kind of fizzle out? If this wasn't a conference championship game, I would bet against the Raging Cajuns. But regardless of what they feel about their coach right now, maybe I can't see the Raging Cajun players not try to get up for this kind of game. This is the bowl game. I would definitely bet against Louisiana, but I'm going to take them to win this game. I think it's going to be an outright upset, technically 3-point upset. So
yeah, I don't know how that's a 3-point upset, but yeah, I agree.
Again, I'm kind of shocked by that line. Even if you take into account turnovers and everything from the last game and everything, I thought Louisiana clearly looked like the better team just overall. But even still, those are our conference championships previews. We give you guys tons of transfer portal information, really out of turn when it kind of came in sometimes there. But again, I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. We kept this at a pretty good time. I think between both recordings, we got about an hour, 15 hour, 20 minutes. So that's some good content for you guys this week. CK, I want to thank you so much for coming on today, man. You have been incredible. I just want to remind everybody out there, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave those comments down below. Let us know. Just really anything you want. Let us know what you think about the transfer news. Let us know what you think about the conference games. Let me know what you think about CK. He's a pretty cool guy, I would say. So he's been pretty awesome for us. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you're following us there. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave that 5-star review. We love seeing those being written. And then if you want to contact me, by far the best place to do that is on Twitter. I am at CFF_Jared. Xavier, my co-host, he is at CFF_Xavier if you want to contact him as well. And then just in general, we're excited to bring you guys what we can during the off season. We got bowl games coming up. We got just really previewing next year, just getting the ground running on that. A lot of review of this year and stuff like that. I'm putting together a spreadsheet that gets me a lot of stats from this year. I'll bring you guys some content based on that. But even still, CK, you want to remind the folks at home where they can find you and what you work on before you head out of here?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Copeeps. So it's COPIEPS. I said I do a baseball podcast, and I'm probably going to do something college fantasy football. I'm at least working on some ranks right now, which I'll release on there. And so that will be out there. It's been great talking with you, Jared. You're a great guy. Glad we could finally meet here. And
yes, sir.
Keep doing what you're doing, man. Spreading the CFF love. I love it.
Absolutely. Again, I'm very excited to see what we can do for this upcoming year. And like I said, y'all, things are kind of quieting down, but we ain't going anywhere. So I appreciate y'all tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a blessed day.